Yep. Thanks so much, Bernie and Pat, for inviting me to be part of this workshop. I really appreciate it. I'm kind of feeling like I'm on the B team or maybe even the C team after listening to everyone else in the yesterday and today talking about modeling and all that good stuff. I won't be talking about modeling or throwing up any formulas. I kind of have that feeling that everyone else involved with this workshop has brainwaves that are working at a level much higher than mine. But what I do want to do is tell you about a program that I administer for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Ohio, and it's our Partners for Fish and Wildlife program. I'm going to give an overview of that program for those of you who may not know that much about it, and then go into looking at a couple of our wetland restoration projects that we currently have ongoing as we speak. So this first picture here shows myself with my team of private lands biologists, 3 guys and myself covering the whole state of Ohio. Small team, but able to get a lot of work done. How do I get to the next slide?
There you go. Yeah, it's a little bit slow in reacting, so.
Okay. Okay, yeah, there we go. So who are we? Who's the Partners Program? We are obviously part of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in the Midwest. We've heard that term a lot here lately with our talks. The Partners Program is organized under the National Wildlife Refuge System. In other parts of the nation, in other regions, it may fall under our Ecological Services offices. And we have about 250 staff located across all 50 states that deal with the Partners Program. It's going to take me a little while to get used to this. So I mentioned the Midwest region. Our state of Ohio is located in Region 3 of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And it's one of 8 states. If you look at the state of Ohio there, I've got some office locations. Ohio Private Lands Office, excuse me, which is where I sit, is in Newark, Ohio, and that's located about 40 miles straight east of Columbus. We also have an Ecological Services field office in Columbus. We have 1 refuge in the state, Ottawa National Wildlife Refuge, located right up south of Toledo on Lake Erie. And then we have like a sub office to our Ohio Private Lands office in Urbana and Champaign County over in Southwest Ohio. On the left-hand side of the slide, you'll see some different ways that you can actually search for my counterpart in any one of these states or across the nation. If you look at kind of the fine print on this map, you'll see there's a lot of names on there. Those are actually all field stations for the Fish and Wildlife Service, whether it's National Wildlife Refuges, wetland management districts, some of the ES office locations. So we've got a lot of coverage servicing the Region 3. And typically at each of these field stations, there's at least 1 private lands biologist. Talking about the missions of the service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we're working with others to conserve, protect, enhance fish, wildlife, and plants, and the habitats for our American public. Through the Partners Program, we're looking to achieve what we call voluntary habitat restoration on private lands. And we do that by providing some financial and technical assistance to show benefit to our federal trust species. So again, what do we do through the Partners Program? Habitat protection, restoration, management, looking at a variety of habitat types, not just wetland, but a lot of different habitat types to protect a variety of species. The Partners Program is very flexible, and we can be creative with the Partners Program while we're working with our partners on the landscape. We share a lot of the same conservation goals as many of our partners, and our private lands biologists are very well trained to help escort that partner, whether it's a private landowner or another private entity, through the whole process, from sitting down with them at the table, kitchen table, to in the original conversation, to working with contractors on site, to the very end of the project with getting it completed on the ground. Again, the program or the program principles for the Partners Program are only on private lands and tribal lands, which we consider private lands. So I guess to clear that up, anything is private lands that's not other federal or state-owned property. So we can work with like local county park districts, metro parks, land trusts, land conservancies, schools, universities, and obviously a private landowner. We do this by working with state-of-the-art science-based techniques, and really the only way we can get our work done is by leveraging our resources that we have. In our office in the state of Ohio, we get funds through the Partners Program, habitat restoration dollars, HR dollars. I only get about probably $80,000 for the whole state, which I divide between the four of us. So it's not a lot of funding. But the one thing about the Partners Program is each of us can take the dollars that we have and leverage that with our partners to make our dollars go further. Obviously doing this through collaborating with public, private entities. When we work on a partner's project with a private entity, we have them sign a minimum of a 10-year Partners for Wildlife agreement. This is not a contract or an easement. It's basically what I've referred to over the years as like a gentleman's handshake between, say, if I'm working with a local park district, between myself signing off on it or one of my biologists and that park district or that private landowner. Cost share, we try to cost share up to 50% on habitat projects. That, of course, is flexible depending on if we can pull in more partners. We can leverage those funds to make them go further. We always want to have the landowner put some input on some skin in the game, basically, on these projects. So we could ask them to put dollars in if they can afford to do that. If not, maybe they can purchase a water control structure or provide in-kind services that also go towards putting that project on the ground. So through the Partners Program, we really have to do these projects to show that we're benefiting what we call our federal trust resources. And those are our migratory birds, anadromous fish, species that are federally listed as threatened or endangered, and then depending on where you are at in the country, some marine mammals. We do this by restoring, like I said, a variety of habitat types, from wetland, riparian, in-stream habitats, native upland habitats. We remove barriers for fish passage and other aquatic species benefits. And obviously the only way we can do this is by leveraging our funds and our resources to get this done. I promise I'll try to keep this going in the right direction. Program eligibility, when someone comes to us and is interested in restoring habitat on their property, we'll look at many different habitat types, not just wetland, but all the others, from upland to forest habitat, riparian, in-stream, and we'll provide suggestions or technical assistance for what that property owner wants to do on their property. What we are limited to, or what I have limited my staff to, is to looking at conducting habitat projects that actually fall within our designated Partners for Wildlife Program focus areas. And this is so we can be more strategic with where we're putting habitat on the landscape. Goodness gracious. Got a wild, crazy trigger finger here. So what we've got here is a map of Ohio showing the work areas of my team. So if you see on the right-hand side of this map, it shows myself and my 3 biologists and where their work areas are. I sit where the star is in Licking County. That's the Ohio Private Lands Office. And then Brent sits there with me. He covers the whole eastern half of the state. That's his work area. Now, I say that most of his work is probably the northeast quadrant of the state. And then right in the center of the map, we have the red dot. That's Columbus, and that's where Ecological Services Office is located. If you go over further west of that to the left, we have the Donnie Knight, sits in Champaign County, covers the southwest quadrant of the state. Keep an eye on that area because that's one of the areas where we're going to look at a wetland site that we're doing right now. And then if you move up to the northwest part of the state, the yellow square is Ottawa National Wildlife Refuge, and Jeff Finn sits there. He covers that northwest part of the state, which is basically analogous to the Western Lake Erie Basin. Within each of their work areas, you see those colorful polygons. Those are our focus areas. So those focus areas have been set up through our strategic plans that we put together, a 5-year strategic plan. Right now we're working on one that's 2017 through 2021. So we'll be looking at sitting down with our stakeholders, our partners this winter and looking to see if we need to revise any of these focus areas. Focus areas are based on where we can have the most impact on the Ohio landscape to benefit our federal trust resources, where we have current partnerships, where we can leverage funds and resources. So what I'm going to do is just talk about wetland restoration through the Partners Program for the sake of this workshop, although we do a lot of other stuff too. But we all know that wetlands are so important out in the watershed for the many functions, values and functions that they have for acting as that sponge on the landscape for flood control, filtering runoff, and besides that, providing wildlife habitat for just a variety of different wildlife. Our restoration activities to get these wetlands restored is ideally, we'd like to restore it to a native condition, but that is very difficult to do in the altered landscape that we are dealing with in Ohio and basically all across the Midwest, I would say all across the nation. It's very hard to restore anything back to native. So we do enhancement or creation when native restoration is not possible. Some of our techniques that we do use are installation of dikes or berms, using water control structures, sheet pile structures, ditch plugs, tile removal, tile breaks. All of this has come up in previous talks, and these are things that we are doing to try to restore these wetlands back on the landscape. Some of the sites, I actually moved here to Ohio about 8 years ago from Minnesota, just north of you, Michelle, there in Iowa. And I was the private lands biologist on the ground there for the Minnesota Private Lands Office for 20 years. We actually had like a pilot study that we were doing looking at sediment removal in some of these little agricultural wetland sites. So a lot of different techniques that we use. Again, I'm going to then focus right now on our West Central Ohio Rivers focus area in Southwest Ohio, and this is where my biologist Donnie Knight works. He's actually worked over the last 5 or 6 years to develop this very large-scale watershed partnership for the Great Miami River watershed. And within that partnership, he's actually looking at working with the cities of Troy, Piqua, and Sydney to actually do some low-head dam removals. And you know, those are not easy projects to get accomplished. It takes a lot of work on the front end, meeting with folks, just bringing all the stakeholders to the table, sitting down and talking about, you know, what we can do, what are the benefits. how this is going to benefit the local communities. Obviously, these projects are not cheap. They're rather expensive to get these things done. So with our little bit of HR dollars that Donnie had, he took that and leveraged those funds with Ohio EPA, their WRRSP program, which is Wetland Resource Restoration Sponsor Program. And actually we got a $4 million grant through Ohio EPA to do some of this work, which he actually started this year on this off-channel wetland project. So what I'm going to show you here is Miami County Park District owns this property. So they're a private entity, private landowner, so we can work with them. And they own this area here. I think they own all of this crop field too. I'm not sure they own this one. But this field down here is in the floodplain of the Great Miami River, which runs right here. And then this is a tributary, Spring Creek, which drops into the Great Miami River. So the idea here is, and what we are currently doing is this polygon outlined in blue is this 14-acre basin in the floodplain, which is a prior ag field. We're excavating the deposited sediment out of there. And then once this area is revegetated, then we'll tie back in with channel connections to Spring Creek, and then there'll be another connection here to the Great Miami River, and then one down here to the Great Miami River. So these connections are set at bankful or Q critical, which is when the stream velocity is at its highest during storm events. So the idea is this area will flood, it'll pass in through these wetland sites, allow for filtering of any nutrients or sediments that's coming through that watershed. Going back, keep an eye on this. This is actually a field road. It's really hard to see it on this aerial. Now, this is a drone bird's eye view of the same site. So this is that field road coming into the wetland site. So basically we've got the front basin. So Donnie calls this area the front basin up here, which will be reconnected to Spring Creek. Then there will be a channel here that will connect to what he calls the back basin. And then there will be a connection here to, this is the Great Miami River, be a connection here, and down here at the corner of this field, there will be a connection. So what he's doing right now is working at taking out a heck of a lot of topsoil. 135,000 cubic yards is what he's estimated based on the size of the pool, the acreage, and the depth that needs to come out of there. We originally got estimates from local contractors on this a year or so ago, and we were looking at 850,000 to 1.5 million just to have this whole area excavated. We didn't have the funds then. We didn't get the EPA grant. So we were kind of scrambling. What are we going to do? So basically, Donnie, who has heavy equipment training through the Miami County Park District, we were able to set some funds up and rent pieces of equipment, this excavator, and Donnie was running that along with the Miami County Park District folks. And Donnie set up a time when he just started calling local contractors in the area. He started this work in February, then it started raining, had to pull out of the field. Then COVID hit, we couldn't get in the field. We were basically mandatory shutdown till early June. Then during that time, he actually reached out to, I think he's reached out to 75 different private companies, told them, we'll load the dirt for you, just bring your truck and take this. So what this has turned into is a kind of an economic boom, if you want to call that, for the local community, because we have trucking companies coming in here with very large semis all the way down to the little private landowners just got his S10 pickup. they're taking the soil away, using it on other projects, in nurseries, landscaping projects, that type of thing. So within that area, the basin that's going to be excavated, we also cut in these deeper channels for overwintering fish habitat. And then within those areas, he's already working to install large woody debris and root balls to provide additional habitat. So this is taking a look. I think this is the upper or the front basin. This is going to allow the sediment and the nutrient rich floodwaters that come off of either Spring Creek or Great Miami River to offload into this off-channel wetland. The idea is this is our first off-channel wetland that we're working on, and we really want to take this idea of doing this and take it out in the watershed to other properties. We currently have probably 3 or 4 other private entities that we're working with to get to this point. So we're hoping we can just keep doing this on the landscape.
Lori, could we get to a point to wrap up in the next minute or two?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I won't go up into, I was going to go to Northwest Ohio, but I'll just finish up here. So obviously by restoring these wetlands in the floodplains, we're providing a place where the floodwaters can offload. And at the same time, we're providing additional fish habitat, freshwater mussel habitat, and other species that can benefit from this. Within this watershed, we do have a couple endangered mussels. I think it's the rayed beam and the snuff box. So these are opportunities that we can maybe provide habitat for those species. I tell you what, with that, I will close it because after this, I would be moving up into the Western Lake Erie Basin, but it sounds like I've been talking too much, so I'm going to end it right there.
Lori, thanks. Let's do a question or two while I'm transitioning to the other slides. We'll make all of your slides as a PDF available at the website so people can look at those. So a quick question or two for Lori while we do a transition. So Lori, if no one's asking, how do you select partners, or how do partners find you? What's the matchmaking? How do you prioritize those?
So we really have not had to do any like mass outreach at all because there's no lack of projects to do on the landscape. And basically when you start working with partners, now for example, where I just showed you where Donnie's working, he's local in that community, so he knows a lot of people, and he can talk a lot like I can. So it's basically reaching out and developing those partnerships. When you do a project like this on the landscape, it kind of becomes a model, and neighbors start talking to neighbors. So, we really don't have to we do outreach and education. That's a big component of the Partners program. But basically, working with our local soil and water conservation districts, NRCS, FSA, local county offices, that's where a lot of our leads come in. We also get leads from our other partners, whether it's a land conservancy or land trust, metro parks, that type of thing. So it kind of grows from there.
So it looks like a couple questions in the chat real quick. So Sarah's asking if you do anything to monitor success of restoration.
I wish we had a better monitoring program. We do not. It's probably one of the areas where we, through the Partners program, kind of fall down on following through. So basically we're, a very dedicated group nationwide to getting out there and working with partners to restore habitat. The monitoring is one of those things that I wish we had more funds just to do that. Our people, it's just capacity, lack of capacity. I think there is some monitoring going on in some of the states, and it may be through a pilot project or something like that, but generally across the board, we aren't.
Yeah, we can talk after if you're interested. Not that we can journey to Ohio, but I think there's some folks who would be potentially great partners and for future things. Like you're right, these partnerships are fantastic, and figuring out some ways in which you can partner with others to do some baseline monitoring, even
That'd
if
be
it's
great.
just a little bit, would be really, really fantastic. These like pre and post kind of studies are just really important, and we don't have enough of them of this scale, I think, to help us. So yeah, let's talk
I,
after if you're at all interested.
yes, I love that idea. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Yeah, my pleasure. Excited.
Cool.
There was another question too, and I'm struggling to find Scott to give him control of this. So somebody asked another question in the chat. If you want to ask that while I'm trying to get this fixed.
You're talking about projects done to support listed plant species or only suitable for
Yes.
non. Yeah, so we do try to do projects that obviously are more aimed towards our teeny listed species, whether it's plants or critters. So, but we're very generalized too across the board with supporting other non-listed species.